So Sony South Africa sent over the Xperia Z5 for review. It's a middle-of-the-road offering in their Z series lineup, sandwiched between the Z5 Premium and the Z5 Compact. Does it have everything I need in order to make the switch for my daily driver, the Moto X 2nd generation? Let's find out. Starting off with the physical tour of the smartphone first, the Z5 is equipped with a 5.2-inch 1080p IPS screen with Sony's tri-luminous display and dynamic contrast enhancer. Overall, the display is plenty bright even in well-lit rooms, and the colors seem to be accurately represented. No complaints here. The display is encased in a sturdy metal housing, with my version coming with the green paint job, but it can also come in white, gold, and graphite black varieties. The paint hasn't held up well to the test of time. By the time this reviewed device got to me, it had already had several spots where the paint was scratched or missing altogether. However, that could just be because the previous users had a complete disregard for the device, since I haven't had a single issue with scratching off the paint myself. The Z5 comes with a small lip around the perimeter of the entire device, which helps to offset the phone slightly from any surface, regardless of whether the device is placed face up or face down. The phone is a large but not cumbersome size of 146mm tall by 72mm wide by 7.3mm thick. On the right side of the phone, you'll find the power button in the middle, which doubles as a fingerprint sensor, the volume up and down rocker, and then the dedicated camera button. A couple of notes about this setup. While the volume rocker is a distinctly different texture than the power button, which is a plus, its orientation on the bottom half of the phone was completely foreign to any of my other experiences, and made it so that I had a hard time with adjusting the volume with a single hand. The camera button is a nice addition. You simply hold the button down at any point, even when the display is off, and it will allow you to open up the camera app, which allows for some quick picture snapping. The only complaint that I have here is also with regards to the volume rocker again. The default programming is for the buttons to act as a zoom in and out function, but when you have the phone in landscape mode, the left button zooms in and the right button zooms out. Seemingly backwards, at least to me. It would be a nice addition for the orientation of the phone to dictate how the buttons operate. And then getting back to the power button, its recessed nature made it fairly easy to find it whenever I needed to turn on the phone. However, the included fingerprint sensor is a bit hit or miss. Sometimes it would work flawlessly, and other times it refused to pick up my programmed finger regardless of how I positioned the digit. However, with that said, it works more often than not now that I've gotten used to using it. But there are still many times where I have to use my PIN to unlock the phone instead. On the bottom of the device, you'll find the standard issue but slightly outdated micro USB port, and then a secondary opening, which I presume is for a wrist strap in case you want to carry it around like a point and shoot camera. On the left, there's the covering, which opens to the nano SIM and micro SD tray, which is pretty simple to remove, and at the top is the 3.5mm audio jack. Sony has included a dual front-facing speaker solution, which isn't really all that loud at max volume, but also doesn't distort audio either. It's actually a pretty great setup for watching movies or listening to music. However, while the audio levels are pretty good, whenever I would play anything above half volume, I could feel the upper rear portion of the device noticeably and heavily vibrate with the audio being played, making its construction quality feel slightly subpar. And staying on the vibration note, the included vibration motor for notifications is incredibly faint. I could barely recognize that it was vibrating when it was placed on a solid surface, let alone when it was in my pocket while I was moving around. And topping off the physical features, the Z5 has IP65 and IP68 water and dustproof ratings. The launcher that's included with the Z5 is quite close to plain vanilla Android, which is what I prefer. My Z5 came with Android Lollipop 5.1.1, but a Marshmallow upgrade is supposed to be imminent. Sony only includes a few pieces of bloatware like AVG antivirus, some social app nonsense, and a few Xperia/PlayStation apps. Nothing overwhelming, but stuff I will personally never use. One of the more helpful features that Sony includes is their small apps feature, which allows you to run a few useful applications in a small windowed mode. A pretty helpful setup. Getting to more of the technical specifications, the Xperia Z5 is equipped with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 octa-core processor, which performs 20 to 30% better than the Snapdragon 801 that was in my Moto X, depending on the benchmark used. The Z5 also comes with 3GB of RAM and 32GB of internal storage, both of which are nice inclusions by Sony. Never once did I experience the device lagging, whether in gaming sessions or transferring to other apps. However, the Snapdragon 810 did get quite warm during extended sessions of gaming, but not uncomfortably so. And the 32 gigabytes of device storage, which should be the industry default, is definitely sufficient, especially since there's the option to include up to a 200 gigabyte microSD card. Battery-wise, the Xperia Z5 comes with a 2900 mAh battery, which Sony claims will get you up to 2 days of battery life. And while this certainly was not my experience, the battery was actually quite sufficient for me. The worst day of battery life I had was after having the GPS and also the screen on for over 1.5 hours, and then my typically power user cycle afterwards. I got only 12 hours of battery life that day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Not quite a whole day. However, normally I'd plug the phone in while using the GPS, so not a typical scenario for me. On a normal day, the device always easily lasted me from the moment I rose until the moment I went to bed, which is roughly from 7 a.m. until about 12 a.m., an average of 17 hours per day. And that's usually with anywhere from 3 to 6 hours of screen on time. So while it's not the purported 2 days Sony claims, it's enough to last me until I typically charge my devices anyways. Getting to the cameras, the front-facing camera has a 5 megapixel sensor capable of taking full HD 1080p videos at 30 FPS, and my selfies tended to come out fine, and Sony's included smile to take the picture feature was a nice touch. The rear camera has a 23 megapixel sensor with an f2.3 aperture. Subjectively, the pictures are sufficient on Sony's auto settings setup, but the auto settings tended to struggle in some high contrast scenarios. However, the manual mode isn't much better since Sony only allows you to adjust white balance and exposure and not ISO. And as far as video goes, the Z5 can record in 4K at 30 FPS, 1080p at 60, or 720 at 120 FPS. However, for whatever reason, Sony doesn't include the 4K video and 120 FPS video in the standard video resolution settings, but instead you have to navigate to the apps section of the camera. The 4K app is fairly obviously labeled, but the 120 FPS app is less so. It's called Time Shift, which I assume was more of a time-lapse setup, but alas is for slow-mo on the 120 FPS frame rate. I dislike the implementation of all of this, but the fact that the phone has these features is a definite positive. So coming to a conclusion, the Z5 is Sony's second-tier flagship device and offers some nice features. However, in my entire time with this phone, I was never wowed. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a completely satisfactory experience using the Z5, and I never felt limited by using it, but I never felt like I had to have this device either. So can I recommend the Sony Xperia Z5? Definitely. It's a solid flagship smartphone with a decent camera, battery life, and screen. But would I recommend you upgrading from your 1 or even 2-year-old flagship device? Not really. I mean, I'm not at all compelled to move on from my Moto X second generation. I mean, there's not much about the Z5 that differentiates it from other flagship devices on the market. It's a complete phone with a good range of features, but features that most phones these days also have. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. And that's it for this review on the Sony Xperia Z5 smartphone. Thanks again to Sony South Africa for sending it over for review. You can like this video if you found it helpful, dislike it if you think I'm completely wrong about the Z5, which if I am, please leave me a comment down below letting me know as to why. And you can subscribe to stay up to date on all of my tech related content, and I will see you guys in the next video. Cheers.